Welcome to the Brain, Music and Learning podcast, Vesa Putkinen.
Thank you.
Wonderful to have you here. With Vesa, we go way back because we started in the area of transfer effects of musical hobbies.
Yes.
Some time ago.
Yes, about 15 years ago.
Yeah. So people know your work on one of the biggest follow-up studies in this field. You followed up like 100 kids starting from when they started their musical hobby all the way until they were teenagers.
That's right.
So that's really, really impressive. But today we are going to talk about your recent paper, and this is about emotions.
Yes.
So you have been working now in the field of emotions for quite some time.
I would say that maybe not a decade, but close.
Yeah. And the connection between emotions and music is a very special one, because the emotions in music, they tend to be a little bit different than the emotions in general.
So, first of all, it's not very clear why, in the first place, music induces emotions. If we think about your kind of everyday or more typical emotions, they are often related to some kind of real-life event. Let's say a loss or you gain something that makes you happy or sad, the vice versa situation. Whereas music doesn't have any kind of real-life consequences in the same sense that these other types of experiences do. So that's kind of the first difference, I would say. And the other interesting thing is that even these kind of nominally negative emotions like sadness, in the context of music and other arts, they are often also experienced as positive emotions. So it's a kind of strange thing that people enjoy sadness in arts and music, and that's one interesting difference between let's say real life emotions and music or art induced emotions.
And music has this kind of two areas of emotions. There are the emotions that the music is trying to express, but then there are also the emotions that music is evoking in the listener, and those might be different. So for example, if you don't like a specific genre of music, it might be very happy music, but if you don't like the genre, it's not going to make you happy.
You kind of easily understand what the composer is intending to convey, but it might not match the feeling that it actually elicits in you.
And also the sadness. So the music may express a lot of sadness, but then those people who want to listen to that music, they might feel not sad, but maybe nostalgic or even calming effects or something like that. And some people even claim that they feel happy when they listen to music that is kind of conveying a lot of sad emotions.
And one thing that people often say in questionnaire studies is that they also find it beautiful, that beauty and sadness, they are for some reason closely correlated in music often.
And we are now in Finland, which is known for traditional music in minor. So we have a lot of traditional songs in minor, and of course we are also known as heavy metal lovers. Yes. So those emotions that are conveyed by music in minor or heavy metal music, they might be something that you don't want to experience. You might not want to become sad, or you might not want to become aggressive, but when you listen to that music, it makes you feel good.
Yes, I think that aggressiveness is also a very good example of this, that people who enjoy that music, they probably do not feel angry per se, but feel some kind of energetic, good feeling.
Empowerment.
Yes.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
So your study was a cross-cultural one. You had Western participants and Eastern participants or Asian participants.
Yeah. So yes, we did a study looking at how which kind of bodily experiences, bodily sensations, different types of music meant to elicit specific emotions. What kind of bodily sensations these musical emotions are associated with. And we indeed tested this in 2 subject groups. Other were European and Northern American, and other ones were Asian. And of course, the idea was that we would want to see whether the first of all whether the bodily sensations would differ across these different emotion categories, and whether they would be, to what extent they would be similar across these 2 subject groups or cultures. Although, of course, they are not like monolithic cultures, but still, people who have been probably at least exposed to somewhat different musics. Yeah. Anyway, so although I do lots of brain imaging in my work, this was purely behavioral study. So we simply asked people what they felt when they were listening to the music. And this study was inspired by a kind of classic study that was published already about 10 years ago by Nummenmaa, in which they showed that kind of non-musical emotions were all associated with very unique kind of bodily sensation, fingerprints, or unique topographies of bodily sensations.
People might remember those pictures of the body maps where people have colored with blue and red and yellow which parts of the body, for example, become like losing their energy in certain basic emotions and other emotions, and which parts are like highlighted.
I think Lauri and others were very clever when they came up with this visualization, because it's very eye-catching and easy to remember.
Yes, and it's a wonderful tool to study what happens in people's bodies, because people can also answer those questions quite nicely with the body map.
Yes, indeed. And in our study we used the emotion categories that we were interested were happiness, sadness, aggressiveness, and what we call tenderness. These 4 were selected because they kind of have both kind of energizing and calming pieces of music and emotions that would be considered, at least in kind of real life, as both positive or negative. So we would kind of cover these 4 quadrants of these two dimensions. And we also added this kind of danceable, groovy category there, although it's not an emotion per se. It was still a kind of interesting thing to test whether music that makes you move also feels somehow different in the body.
So that's something very specific to music. Mm-hmm. Music, compared to other emotion studies, music has this ability to make people move, and it's kind of musical dimensions. Mm-hmm. It's related to the rhythm patterns of the music, but it's also related to the general kind of emotional style of the music.
Yes. And again, this is maybe something that makes music-induced emotion special, that we didn't try to look at things like disgust or something. That's very rarely, although you might find some music annoying, it doesn't perhaps very easily elicit this kind of visceral feeling of disgust, although that has a very strong bodily component, obviously, but still it doesn't kind of fit to music-induced emotions. And we had both Western music and Asian music. So we tried to make sure that it wasn't just a question of familiarity or anything like that, and so that people would rate music that was probably more familiar to them because of the cultural exposure, and then also music that was less familiar. And if I go to the results, what we found was that the different emotions weren't as clearly differentiated by the bodily sensation as these kind of real-life emotions. We found that, for instance, the sad and tender musical pieces tend to elicit very similar bodily sensations. And this is probably because that, like we already discussed, sadness isn't really a kind of truly a negative, or at least as negative as sadness is in real life. So maybe it gets kind of, it isn't also differentiated from other like beautiful and calm music at the level of the body. And we also found that the happy and danceable songs, they elicit very, very similar bodily sensations. And I guess the most interesting finding is that both subject groups responded very, very similarly. So even though they probably had some, at least to some degree, different musical backgrounds and other cultural experiences, they still responded to these bodily sensation questionnaires in a very, very similar way, suggesting that there might be something, there is something that kind of crosses over these cultural boundaries in these music-induced sensations.
So that makes the music-induced emotions similar to the basic emotions, because with the basic emotions, this kind of research has been going on for decades, and it has been shown that if you are able to elicit a basic emotion like happiness or sadness in a person of any culture, so then the effects of that on the body and on the behavior and on facial expressions tend to be quite similar. Of course, the ways of inducing those emotions might differ in different cultures, but if you are able to do that, so then the actual output or the result of the induced emotion seems to be the same in different cultures. So that would be then true also for music.
Well, it looks like it that at least this study points to that direction. And we also kind of examined the relationship between different musical features. So we extracted different like rhythmic and harmonic features of the music and tried to correlate these to both the bodily sensations as well as people's emotional ratings for different emotions. And we found that these correlations were very similar across these two subject groups, suggesting that maybe it's somehow the features of the music that or at least we were able to little bit elucidate how the different features of music are linked to different emotions, and it looks like that they are very similar across cultures, suggesting that maybe this is the reason why music elicits such a similar emotional responses in these two subject groups, because they react in a similar way to these musical features.
So that would mean, when you say musical features, you are talking about things like tempo and staccato, legato, or pulse clarity, or...
Yes, indeed. Things like this. They were these features that are probably very familiar to all listeners, and something more complex, but it wasn't just limited to very simple features. There were also surprisingly kind of higher level features that were related to kind of the harmony of the music. Those were also showed very similar correlations between the emotional ratings in both groups.
So then that would say that different musical genres, different musical cultures would still be using the same musical features to trying to elicit certain emotions.
At least to some degree. Of course, obviously also our Asian subjects have been exposed to many of these hit songs that these Western hit songs, and these days probably also vice versa. So I guess the internet is kind of changing things a little bit. So people are more, monocultural these days than maybe some time before, but yeah.
Researchers have a hard time trying to find people who haven't heard Western music.
Yes, exactly,
I think it's almost impossible these days. Yeah. So music has a certain distance to the basic emotions, as you said. When you use music, you can kind of investigate your own emotions. You can try to amplify some of your own emotions. You can try to forget some emotions if you want. So music could be used as a kind of an tool for helping yourself in your own emotional tasks, what you have to try to achieve. I'm thinking especially teaching and learning here. So teachers obviously always know that if you get everybody to sing together and have fun in the world of music, so that will empower the learners, and it will easily, make people happy together, and learning becomes easier and so on. But it's also with more difficult emotions, like more difficult situations, like trying to understand, for example, your anxiety or your sadness or something like that. It's not an easy task for us humans to live with our emotions and try to do that every day and still be able to learn new things, go to school or studies or go to work and so on. So music might be one area where we can get help to this difficult task.
Yeah, indeed. And I guess that's one of the main reasons why people listen to music. They try to modify their mood and emotional state.
And this distance from the basic emotions is probably one key there.
Yeah.
So sad music doesn't make you sad, but it might help you understand your own sadness or even overcome your own sadness. Yeah. That's very interesting. So I want to congratulate you on this wonderful paper.
Thank you.
And I'm sure that people will be using these results in their work. And I hope to have you back in the next episode when you have some new data, because I have heard some rumors that something interesting is coming up. So we hope to have you back soon.
Yes.
Thank you, Vesa.
Thank you.